Hey everyone, my name is Cho. I am the founder and sole tutor at Impetus LSAT. And today I wanted to walk you guys through quantifiers. So quantifiers are a pretty heavily tested concept on the LSAT. It doesn't show up as frequently as conditional reasoning, but it can show up, and it's a concept that's very frequently misunderstood. And it's one of those things where when it does show up and it is tested, if we don't have these concepts understood, we will very likely get the question wrong, or we might take a really long time to answer that particular question. So it is very important that we have these mastered, especially because a lot of these terms I'm about to show you are very frequently misunderstood by people because we use them in a pretty different way in our everyday lives. And so make sure to constantly review this video, rewatch it multiple times to really make sure you have it down. But to start this out, let's just talk about what a quantifier is. So a quantifier should not be confused with a quantity. So it's not a specific number. So for example, the number 12 is not a quantifier. The number, or 75% is not a quantifier. A quantifier is more so a term that tells me some idea of how frequently something is going to happen or how likely something is going to happen, but it doesn't tell me exactly how many times. So for example, the word some. If I told you that I had some slices of pizza, it doesn't really tell you exactly how many slices I had, but it gives you just a general vague sense, right? So that's essentially what a quantifier is. Now, it's worth noting that there are three different levels of strength that pretty much every single LSAT statement is going to fall under. So you have weak language, strong language, and absolute. Now you also have two different levels of strength. You have strength in terms of quantity. That's again referring to how frequently something happens. Some is an example of that. But then you also have strength in terms of probability, or how likely something is to happen, right? So for example, if I told you that it's likely going to rain tomorrow, that's kind of related to quantity in a sense, but it doesn't tell you exactly how many times something is going to happen or how many times it has happened in the past. Okay, so now that we understand that, let's talk about the levels of strength in a bit more detail. Now, weak language, as you can see here, it means it could be anything greater than 0%. So for any given word, if it could just be anywhere greater than 0, then it's going to be weak. Now, notice what this means. That means it's going to be anywhere from 1 up to and including the possibility of 100%. That is super important. So that means if I had some slices of pizza, and this is where the word some is used in a slightly different way than how people use it in everyday life. Some actually means I had greater than 0 slices, which means maybe I had a single slice, maybe I had the entire pizza. That is still totally possible. Okay, and yes, I have done that before. So, but let's talk about strong language then. So strong language means anything greater than 50%. So that's going to be 51 up to, and again, you might have guessed it, including the possibility of 100%. So an example of a strong term would be the word most. Now notice how I wouldn't be able to say that I had most of the pizza if I only had a single slice, right? So I definitely can't just have 1% or less than 50%. By definition, most means greater than 50. But keep in mind that again, if I had most of the pizza in the LSAT world, it is totally possible that I have the entire thing as well. Okay. Last but not least, you have absolute language, which just simply means it is 100%. So this would be words like all. And if you've read through my blog posts on conditional reasoning, you would know that all means it's a conditional statement because we can use the 100% test and we can verify that whatever we're talking about 100% of means that something is guaranteed. Okay, so words like all, every, whenever, all these types of terms that indicate 100% will be absolute and also will be conditional. And pardon my terrible handwriting, I hope you guys can read this okay. So for most people, understanding absolute language is pretty straightforward. right? So we're going to focus more on the weak language, the strong language. And what we're going to do here is I'm going to give you a few terms, and then we're going to try to determine whether it falls under weak language or strong language. And the way to tell, right, is you want to ask yourself, first off, is there any possibility that I can accurately use this word in less than 100% of cases, right? If that's the case, then it definitely cannot be absolute, because absolute has to be 100%. So that narrows it down to either weak or strong, right? Then from there, you want to ask yourself, is there any way I could possibly use this word for less than 50% of cases? If so, it has to be weak, okay? And then if the answer is no, of course, in that case, that means it has to be greater than 50%, meaning it would be strong language. So that's how we're going to kind of reason through it. So, for example, let's take the word many. Now, a lot of times people think that many indicates strong language, and many definitely sounds stronger than some, right? But let's think about this real quick. And I hope I'm not giving too many people PTSD here. But how many cockroaches would you need to see in a room to consider it to be many cockroaches? For some people, it might be 2 cockroaches. For some people, it might be 5 cockroaches or 10 cockroaches, right? But is that greater than 50% of cockroaches in the entire world? Absolutely not. It's probably not even 1%, right? And so for that reason, many can be used in less than 50% of cases, which means it is weak language. Okay. Now remember, many could still be greater than 50%. It's possible. It's just not certain. Okay. Now, what about the majority? Well, that's where we start to fall under strong language, because majority by definition means greater than 50%. You wouldn't be able to say that something happens in the majority of cases if it only happens 10% of the time, right? So majority is strong. Okay. So what about the word several? Well, let's go back to the pizza example. If I had several slices of pizza, how many slices did I have? Well, some people might consider 3 slices to be several, but that would still be less than half. So for that reason, the very fact that it could be less than half means it is weak language. Okay, so that's how we're going to think about these terms. Now, here are some more strong words to be aware of. Words like usually, tends to, vast majority, almost all. Okay, all of these are going to indicate strong language, and they're all going to be pretty interchangeable with each other on the LSAT. Now, when it comes to weak language, you have words like often. Now, this one confuses a lot of people, right? But think about it this way. Suppose someone often goes to the gym. How many times are they going? You might consider someone going 2 times or 3 times a week to be going often, but that's still less than half of the week, and that's still less than half of the days in a year. So often is still weak language. Same exact thing for words like frequently or occasionally. Now keep in mind, this is by no means an all-inclusive list. There are so many words that I haven't listed out that can still be thought of as quantity quantifiers. But the important thing is, for one, I would highly recommend memorizing each of these terms so that you don't even need to think about it, right? The more you have to think about these terms, the more time it's going to take and the less confident you're going to feel. But the more important thing here is understanding the reasoning behind it. Why do these terms fall under each of these buckets? That way, even if you encounter an unfamiliar term, you'll still be able to navigate through it and understand what level of strength it falls under. Great, so the next up, let's talk about strength in terms of probability. Now, absolute probability means we're 100% certain that it's going to happen, right? So these are words like if something must happen, or if something will happen, right? Now remember, once you start to say it will probably happen, that's a little bit weaker, right? Or if you said, yeah, if you use will along with any types of probability terms, that's when it starts to fall under less than absolute. But if you just have will, then you are 100% certain it's going to happen, right? So, or if something is required to happen, etc. Okay, so again, if you read through my conditional blog posts, you would know that absolute certainty actually equates to necessary condition indicators within conditional statements. Okay, so from there, let's talk about weak strength and strong strength in terms of probability then. Now, remember, if I knew that it's likely going to rain tomorrow, doesn't mean necessarily that it's 100% certain it's going to rain, right? But I also wouldn't be able to say it's likely going to rain if there's only a 10% chance of it raining, because likely means more likely than not. So there has to be a greater than 50% chance. Or if I said that something is probably going to happen, that also means greater than 50. Okay? Or if something is almost certainly going to happen, I wouldn't be able to say it's almost certain if there's only a 10% chance. But other words like if something is possible, I mean, that's very vague, right? Like that could be a 1% chance, that could be a 90% chance, it could even be a 100% chance. So that's going to be weak. Or if something could happen, or something may happen, right? And again, these are not all inclusive. These are just the more frequent words that you can expect to see on the LSAT. So really try to understand the reasoning and the rationale behind it. Great, so now that we know some of the frequently used words, the level of strength, the types of strength, let's now talk about some of the implications and some of the ways that the LSAT is going to try to trick us. So one thing to keep in mind here is 100%, of course, is absolute. But imagine if I had 100% of the pizza. Well, if I had 100% of the pizza, I definitely had greater than 50% of it, right? So the really important thing to understand here is that all implies most. It's not even that like if you had all of the pizza, you probably had most of it. You definitely did, okay? And then if I had greater than 50% of the pizza, it also definitely means I had greater than none of it, right? I had greater than 0% of the pizza. So that means that strong language also implies weak language. So if I had all of the pizza, it implies that I had most of it. If I had most of the pizza, it implies that I had some of it. So that means that I can infer this way. Okay, I can always go from stronger to weaker language. Now, what we have to be careful about is going the other way. And this is frequently how the LSAT is going to try to trick you. And these are called exaggerated answer choices, where the LSAT goes stronger than what is actually being presented to you in the passage. Now, just because I had some of the pizza, that doesn't necessarily mean that I had greater than 50% of it. I could have just had one slice. Now, it's important to understand that if I'm saying that something is not inferable, I'm not saying it's impossible, right? Because remember, if I had some of the pizza, it's still possible that I had more than half. It's even possible that I had all of it, but it's just not certain, and that's why it's not inferable, okay? So I can't go from weak language to strong, and as you might have guessed, I can't go from strong to absolute either, because if I had most of the pizza, it's still possible that it did not have 100% of it. Okay, so those are the really important things to understand with regards to LSAT quantifiers.